First things first, Alex, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm alright, thanks.
Good.
So before we get into the music and the album, I'd like to jump back a little bit and to Guernsey.
Yes, old Guernsey.
I haven't been there myself, but I can imagine it's quite isolated, quite...
Yes, not many people have been there. It's basically like any sort of island community. There's like, a very small group of people and everyone kind of knows each other and you can't go into town without bumping into somebody that you know. But yeah, it's a lovely place. It's really beautiful and it's kind of rural and yeah, very isolated, like you say.
And obviously we have the internet these days, so how music can reach you is quite obvious. But how did you develop the passion for music? Because I can imagine there aren't too many bands playing around.
Yeah. I guess it came from my parents mostly, like very early on. Do you want me to give you a chance to adjust that?
No, that's fine. Just keep that.
Yeah, I guess my parents were kind of my first introduction into music because my dad was in a few bands when he was younger, and my mum was kind of in the music industry a little bit. She used to manage bands and that sort of thing. But I was in a few like punk bands and kind of gospel bands like growing up, quite a few different things, and then I kind of got into electronic music around age 15 or 16 because when I thought of electronic music previous to that, I thought of like, house music and clubs and kind of that sort of thing. But I started listening to James Blake and Subtract and Hudson Mohawk and kind of more left field stuff. And that really got me interested in producing and that sort of thing.
And I will have to look on this paper for the name of it, but where did I put it? I'm sorry for this, but there's the
first mixtape.
No, the machine that kind of helped you make music.
Ableton.
Ableton. Sorry.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'll start the question, but so you mentioned at age 15, 16 you started to discover electronic music. Mm-hmm. Was discovering the Ableton then a revelation for you?
Yeah, I think. Because up until that point I was playing in bands and I was playing all sorts of instruments, guitar and drums and bass and kind of jumping around. But when I got into using Ableton, it was kind of like, oh, I can do it all myself, kind of in my bedroom. And that was appealing to me because I'm a bit of a loner and I spend a lot of time in my bedroom. So.
Because am I right in saying that most of the album was still made in your bedroom?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to, because I signed a record deal with a major label and I didn't want that to change the music, so I stayed kind of working on my laptop and in my bedroom to kind of maintain a bit of that like lonely kind of sound as well. Yeah.
And can you take me through just a normal day where you work on your music? Do you just is it very rigid scheduled or is it just...
No, the opposite.
Okay.
I have a bit of a problem with like separating work and home life. Okay. It kind of all blends into one. Right. So some days I'll wake up in the morning and really want to make some music and I'll spend the day doing that, maybe relax in the evening. Other times I'm up all day and I just do nothing. And then I'll start working at like midnight and be up until 5 a.m. Because I don't have a studio or like, I don't even have a pair of speakers. I still just work in my headphones. So I can kind of do it anywhere, which is a good thing, but also a bad thing because the whole world becomes your office.
Well, that's interesting then, because now obviously you travel a lot and you play shows everywhere. Mm-hmm. Do you work on your music while traveling?
Yeah, my laptop is just sitting over there, and I was working on a bit of music right up until I went to stage just now to play the show. So it happens kind of everywhere. Yeah.
So this is always a very difficult question to answer, but what inspires you? You mentioned discovering electronic music and then having the tools to do something with it. But what then, where do you start? Does it start with a sound, a certain...
It's quite a difficult question. I guess it can be anything. It can be like a new bit of music that you hear that's really inspiring and you think, oh, I didn't think about things that way. And then that becomes like, you want to make some music. Sometimes it's like, I'll be watching a film and it'll make me feel a certain way. Okay. Other times it's just like a texture even, like like the sound of rain on a window or something like that. So it's quite a mixed bag, really. I know that's not a very good answer, but
fair enough.
Happens in different ways.
But part of it, then, because like you say, it happens in different ways. Then is that maybe why it's very eclectic? Because you have all these different types of.
Definitely, I think the eclecticism as well is like a choice, because there's artists that work very hard on one sound and kind of making a very coherent project and like identity. But I didn't really want to do that with Mura Masa. I kind of wanted it to be like this broad range of influences and styles, and sometimes it can sound a bit jumbled and mixed up, but I kind of like that. It's like a collage. Yeah.
I read something, I think it was another interview where you kind of you mentioned something along the lines of do your homework, that people say they have certain influences, but they don't, it doesn't shine through really. But for you, so do you consider yourself a student of music?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess a student of culture, more so. Just kind of like, if I, what's a good example? If I want to use some sort of sound that's belongs to a certain genre, I'm not just going to use it and kind of be like, oh, that sounds cool. I would first like grime, for example. If I'm going to use some grime samples and that kind of style, I'll go out of my way, watch every grime documentary that I can find, read all the Wikipedia articles about different artists, you know, follow the labels within that scene and try and like even go to a grime night or like, you know, things like that, and try and get immersed so that you can actually understand what you're doing rather than just kind of culture vulturing.
Right. Okay, that signals my time is almost up, so I'm kind of have to speed the stuff up. But well, on your debut record, there are you mentioned that you're quite a solitary worker in a sense, but there are so many people, and then not just anyone playing on Damon Albarn, A$AP Rocky. What was it like to have these people, and then was it something where you actually met with them in the studio?
It kind of depends on artist to artist, because I think an important thing to do as a producer is to work. If you're working with a vocalist or another artist, I think it's important to kind of work with them and kind of do things their way. So with like Rocky and Christine and Damon, we met up in the studio and it was very like personal. But with like Charlie XCX and Designer, for example, they're, you know, traveling a lot and they don't necessarily have time to get in the studio. So that was done more over email. But it's always like, you know, I'm a fan of theirs, they're a fan of mine, and that's what comes first. I think that's kind of the most important part of the collaboration.
And then, is there maybe an example you can take of, it doesn't have to be the ones we mentioned, but where you kind of delved into what they did, and then like you mentioned before? Yeah,
I did that with all of them, to be honest. Like, and I went into every collaboration on the album already being a massive fan of. But like a good example would be A$AP Rocky. Like, I was a huge A$AP Rocky fan right up until when I met him. But after we had started working together, I went back and like really looked into like the New York rap scene and like where that sound comes from, and tried to understand him a bit better, I guess. And it makes for a better collaboration.
And so now, for you yourself, is the bar set really high for the next thing that you do, or is it too soon to think about it?
I'd say the bar's pretty high. I'm going to try not to worry about it though. I think it'll be fine.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for your time.
No worries. I'm sorry you got rushed out.